So hey, welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the Glidecam and just kind of a general sort of overview and how I like to use it, or what I think is good about the Glidecam in comparison especially to the kind of the newer trend towards the motorized gimbals. You know, I think there are a couple of advantages that a Glidecam has over those systems, and I think the biggest one, or the main one, is the fact that it's just reliable and it doesn't really have many points of failure. Really, I mean, it's not going to break unless you really try. It gets crushed or broken somehow. But it would take a pretty big physical blow to break it. You kind of want to keep the gimbal maybe a little clean and dust and sand and grit free, but really it's not that hard to do. So reliability, and you just know that this piece of equipment is going to work when you need it. Another big advantage of it is, so I've got kind of a lower budget model. It's the Glidecam XR Pro. There are tons of different models of Glidecam and they range in price. This one I think is under $300 new. They go all the way, up to about $1,000 probably for, or maybe just a bit under $1,000 for the high-end models. But they all essentially do the exact same thing. They work the same way. The more expensive ones just have some ease of use functions or features, like as far as the adjustability, it's just a little bit easier to use. And some of the other high-end models, when you can flip them around, and you can the gimbal, you can actually adjust it to come up this way. So when you have it operating upside down, it's more stable. Another good thing is, so they've been around for a while, and since the underlying technology is the same in every model, you can find them used, for a lot less than you would pay new. I've noticed that if you watch some like YouTube tutorials or reviews or anything on Glidecams, like there seems like there's always like one or two people in the comment sections or who are like, I bought one of these and then I could never figure out how to get it adjusted, and it was just too, like, the learning curve was too steep, and they just didn't, it didn't work out for them. So there's a lot of them that people are looking to sell. The initial setup is, it's a little bit tricky. I was wondering if I was ever going to get it balanced quite right, or perfectly, I should say, but it just takes practice. So if this is something that you're really into and you think that this is a piece of gear that's going to benefit you, it's going to take a little bit of time to come to grips with it. And not only is like getting it set up a hurdle initially, but also just being proficient with it and getting good results with it takes a lot of practice. So it's analog, so all the movements are up to you. You control it 100% with your hands, with your fingers, with how well you balanced it. But like I said, admittedly, I've not used firsthand any of the motorized gimbals. Obviously, I've seen a lot of the results from them. I've seen a lot of videos where people are using them, so I kind of know what it looks like. For me, one thing that I really do like about this, aside from the fact that it's just reliable and it's just going to work all the time, is that it has kind of an organic look to it. It has like you can see the hands of the operator. You can see the human aspect to the way the motion looks, and I think it's common to see in cinema since the Steadicam system was invented in the 70s, and they've been using it for 40 years. You can see that human operated aspect to it, and it's not robotic, it's not perfect, it's not like just tracking perfectly level and no sway and super controlled. Like, that's what you get with the electronic ones like the DJI and the Zhiyun crane. You don't get that with this. I mean, you get very controlled and very smooth movements, but there is a little bit of human operation in it, and I don't think that's a bad thing. So I've already got this pretty well balanced for the BMPCC. And that's kind of another aspect of this video I wanted to talk about, was I really think that the BMPCC is a super good pairing. That never seems to be quite balanced the same. Is a really good pairing for a Glidecam. And there are a couple reasons for that. One, it's super lightweight. Another cool thing about the BMPCC and is that fact that, and it's a negative for a lot of people in certain situations, is the depth of field. It's easy to get a really deep depth of field with the BMPCC, which is a good thing if you're a single operator on a Glidecam because you can't adjust focus. Every time you touch, if you're trying to manually adjust focus on here, you can see how it's going to mess up your shot. So you really can't do that. So you have to set your focus point for your shot and just maintain that. The only way to do focus pulls on a Glidecam is with a wireless follow focus system. You have a deeper depth of field, so you're not worried about things coming in and out of focus so much. And the third point that's worth mentioning is that with these lenses and this sensor, the minimum focal distance of a lot of the lenses is pretty close. It's about a foot. So you can get up really close to your subject and not lose focus. And another thing that I was kind of messing around with, I was just playing with this and I was like, you know what happens when I do this? And I point it directly at me and I walk around, and if you're a vlogger and you like to do like a lot of movement and you're out and about in your area, wherever it is you're filming, and you want to kind of just walk and talk, it's a really easy way to do that and have perfectly smooth walking and talking shots. Obviously, one negative, going back to the negatives with the BMPCC, is that the 2.8 times crop factor basically makes this 12mm zoom about a 35mm. So you're not on a wide angle anymore. It's more of a standard look. One bonus to that, or one positive, I guess, is that it's a flattering focal length for your face. It's not distorting it. It's not giving that wide angle kind of like protrusion, which is good for someone like me. But you're not getting as much of the background. So if you want to get more of the background in it, you're going to need to go even wider than 12mm, or you're going to need a focal reducer like the speed booster, for instance, so you can get a wider field of view. So anyway, I've been messing around. I haven't really gone out and had any jobs where I've used the BMPCC and the Glidecam. I've just been kind of playing with it around the house. It's really easy to just kind of float this thing around and just get real out, right up close to things and just move and dart. And man, I should have looked this up. I'm terrible. A cinematographer who uses Glidecams a lot, and he's won the Academy Award for Best Cinematography like I think 3 times in the last 5 years, and I can't remember his name, but he works with Iñárritu, the Mexican director who's done Birdman and The Revenant and Gravity. He was a cinematographer on all 3 of those films, and he won the Oscar for I think maybe all 3 of them actually. But especially Birdman, if you've seen Birdman, the whole thing is on Steadicam, and just that that fluid movement, that flying camera, and it's going like it's doing 2 shots and singles, and going back and forth between those things, and it's doing all the coverage of a scene with multiple actors just with one camera. You can do that. You're not going to have the smooth rack focuses if that's what you need, because obviously they've got multiple camera operators and a first AC pulling focus, but on a small scale, on a small budget, you can get a look like that. Another, if you're familiar with Terrence Malick, that same cinematographer has worked with Terrence Malick ever since Tree of Life. And Tree of Life and The Knight of Cups, are 2 films that used a lot, not exclusively, but used a lot of Steadicam. Watch those films, and it kind of gives me a lot of inspiration for, how to use this. It kind of like made me, get the Glidecam back out and really want to mess with it. Before I got the BMPCC, I was using the Glidecam with the Sony a7S II, which is another really good option. It's a light camera, so you don't have to weigh the Glidecam down so much where it gets super heavy. So yeah, it's another really good camera to use. I mean, really anything, Panasonic, GH4, GH5, any of those mirrorless cameras that are kind of a small form factor. You can get small lenses, and even Canons with good autofocus are a good option for these. And you can put bigger cameras on here. Even this XR Pro, which is a cheap one, is rated to hold 10 pounds. So theoretically you could put, I've put a Canon C100 on here, no problem. I had trouble with a C300 because what you have to do, if you're not aware, ideally what you want to do is you kind of want to weigh your camera, and then you want to match that with the weights of the bottom of the sled. So you have these little discs, and you can just add and subtract them to try to match the weight of the camera. When you get a big camera like a C300, the whole system is going to get really heavy, and it's going to be hard for you to operate without any sort of support. And that's another thing you can do. You can get vest and arm support to take the weight off. So there's a lot of tutorials about how to get this set up. I think I'll just kind of give you kind of a quick overview of how it works. And I'll do that now. The basic principle of this, like I mentioned, is that you kind of want to get the weight of the top and the weight of the bottom pretty similar. And even if you don't, there's ways around that. But first things first, when you get your camera on here, the first thing you're going to want to do is do the drop test. And so what you're going to do is hold the whole thing parallel to the ground, and then you're going to let go and then count or time how long it takes to get perpendicular. The general rule is you want it to be about 2 seconds. So if you drop it 1/1000, 2/1000, that's kind of where you want to be. So if it's too fast, if it drops too quickly, you have two options. You can either remove weights from the bottom of the sled, or you can shorten the center pole section. So you've got a little screw here that you can undo, and then you can not pull it all the way out, but lengthen it or shorten it. So if you lengthen it, the bottom is going to get heavier in effect, and if you shorten it, the bottom of it is going to get lighter. So I obviously shortened it there so you can see how long it took. So you have options, so you don't necessarily have to add weights. You can try to lengthen and shorten the center tube. Yeah, so there it got back closer to where it was before. So that's your first thing. The first thing before you mess with any other balancing is just kind of get that 2 second drop test thereabouts. And then what you're going to do is you're just going to hold it up steady and then see where it kind of tilts to. Does it tilt forward? Does it tilt back? Does it tilt left and right? And then what you're going to do, you have 2 adjustment points. You've got these 4 screws on the sides, which when you loosen them, you can slide this whole base plate forward and back. And then also you've got 4 screws on the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, which let you slide the plate left and right. So let's just mess this all up. Push it forward and push it to my left. Alright, so you can see that it's totally messed up now. So that's really it. And then you're obviously going to make those little adjustments, and it just takes time to get it balanced exactly right. And the thing with this model is you can see you have those 4 screws that you need to undo. Some of the more expensive ones, like there's a little dial, you can just turn it and it'll move it forward and back just as you turn that dial. So it's much more easy to make those fine adjustments too. This one's a little more cumbersome, and I don't tighten all 4 of them and then make an adjustment. I usually just tighten 2 of them, so that it just kind of saves time. Another thing to keep in mind is that it's not necessarily a bad thing if it tilts forward a touch, because depending on the kind of shot you're doing, if you're walking forward and if you're moving relatively quickly, the inertia and the gravity is going to kind of push it level. So if it's kind of like this, it'll be okay if that's the kind of shot you're doing. So you might not want it completely parallel to the ground. If it's tilted forward, that might work okay for you. Another thing to keep in mind is that you want your camera completely set up. How are you going to shoot with it? So take the lens cap off, have the battery in, have your media in there. Filters you're going to put on the lens, make sure they're on there, because any little weight variations are going to throw off the balance. So if you get it all balanced and then you remember, oh, I need to be at not 12 millimeters, but at 35 millimeters, then you're going to throw your balance off. Another thing to keep in mind is the center of gravity of your camera. You kind of want it aligned with the center pole. So there's a couple ways you can do that. You know, just take the camera off and set it on like a cylinder, a tube of some sort, and see if you can get it balanced on that, and then make note of where that center of gravity is, and then just kind of, that's where you want it to be on the base plate. So I've got a couple of different adapters on here. I kind of rigged this up kind of oddly. I would recommend an Arca Swiss type, so you can easily just remove the camera from it, and then you can, you know, put it on a tripod or hand hold it or whatever you want to do, and then just drop it back on really easily. The mistake I made is that this Arca Swiss plate I have has this giant knob here that interferes with the bottom of the plate. So I have a Manfrotto quick release adapter underneath that. So you can either get a Manfrotto plate, quick release plate, or an Arca Swiss, or in my case you've got both. But so I would recommend doing that. That way, you know, otherwise you're basically bolting the camera directly to the bottom of this plate, which, you know, if you're going to be using it all day, that's not a big deal. But if you want to be able to take it off and on quickly, that's not going to be an ideal situation. Additionally, here you can see on the bottom, you can move these weights towards the center of the pole or out towards the ends. Potentially, if they're towards the ends, you're going to have a little bit more stable, kind of laterally forward and back. But if you push them towards the center, it's going to effectively make it heavier. So if you want to make it heavier without adding more weight, that's another adjustment you can try to push it towards the center. There's a lot of different flexibility to it, a lot of different adjustments. It just takes, it's trial and error and a lot of practice. But once you get the hang of it, it's really not that bad. And switching cameras out, it's not hard to do. I could put the Sony a7S II on here, and in a matter of a few minutes, you know, get it pretty well balanced. So lastly, in terms of operation, so this is where it gets tricky. You can hold it a couple different ways. One way to take the pressure off your wrist is to try to put the palm of your hand on the bottom of this, and then grip it like here, like so. And then when you get tired, then just grip it kind of like you would normally do. So the heavier this is, you know, it's putting a lot of pressure on your wrist and your forearm. You might want to do a lot of those kind of exercises where you squeeze stuff. It would probably really help you out. But in terms of actually shooting with this, what you want to do is kind of get a super light touch on the center pole, close to the gimbal. So you want to be right below it, and you don't want to grip it. So as you can see, right when I gripped it, how much the camera jerked. And you're basically defeating the purpose of the gimbal. You want the camera to be floating freely, and you don't want to be gripping it, because basically you're just holding it like it's on a monopod or something. So you just want to have your thumb and your index finger just lightly resting on the center pole, and then just kind of keeping it where you want it, keeping it where you're pointing or where you want it pointed, and just kind of tapping it. And then when you want to turn, you just kind of give it a little nudge and turn it in that direction. And you know, you can make quick moves. You know, it's going to be a little jerkier, but that's just kind of the whole point of it. It's just a little bit more manual. It's like analog. Anyway, it just takes a lot of practice. I would keep your shoulders back, keep your head up. It's going to put a lot of strain on your back, your neck, and your shoulders. So have good posture and keep your elbows kind of locked into your body. Think about keeping your body and this whole system as like kind of one unit, and just being as steady and smooth and consistent as possible. You know, what I like about this is the spontaneity. Like, you can really you know, watch what you're filming and react to what's going on, and make these quick moves and kind of really explore. And you know, not everything's going to work, and that's where the practice comes in. And the more you do it, the more intuitive, I guess, you'll be at it. You know, I'm not there by any means. Anyway, like I said, I'm just rambling. I hope you enjoyed this video and got something out of it. If you need a more in-depth tutorial about how to set one of these up and how to shoot with it, you know, I can try to do that for you. And I definitely recommend, if you have a BMPCC or something like this, the Micro Four Thirds or Super 16 sensor size is a really good match for the Glidecam. It's really flexible and easy to get that depth of field you need, so you're not trying to mess with the focus point.